This is a Dreamcast disc and is for use only on a Dreamcast unit. Playing this disc on a hi-fi or other audio equipment can cause serious damage to its speakers.
Dreamcast, up to 6 billion players.
Welcome back to the stage of history.
Why don't we play together?
Hey, it's time to make some crazy money. Are you ready? Here we go!
Please stop this disc now.
Hello and welcome to episode 87 of the DreamPod by Dreamcast Junkyard. I'm Andrew, and I'm sorry to have kept you waiting so long for a new episode, but at least it wasn't 18 years. Sorry, Yu Suzuki, cheap shot. We're back for yet another year of Dreamcast-related chat and hijinks, and what better way to start a new year than to bring you a very special guest. Before we get to that, though, let me welcome two of the usual suspects. First up, it's a man on a mission to clean up the junkyard one controller at a time. Not this junkyard, I don't think we're quite filthy enough yet. I'm, of course, referring to the person responsible for all this junk. It's Tom. How are you, Tom?
Good afternoon, Andrew. I'm very well, thank you. That's a very well thought out introduction. Obviously, you're referring to me going up into my attic recently and pulling out all of my old Dreamcast controllers and painstakingly cleaning them one by one with a big stack of, those wipes that you get to clean the kitchen with.
Yeah.
I went for an entire stack of those.
Wow.
Cleaning off all the detritus. Is that the right word?
Yeah. Those are the ones you were saying. Those are the ones that you took to like events and stuff. So those will be like caked in like stuff, surely.
I dread to think, because the last time those controllers were actually out of that bag was at a Play Expo Blackpool in 2018. So they've probably been festering in that bag. I'm surprised the life form didn't jump out that had like sort of created itself from the DNA of people's hand juice.
Nice. And that takes on a completely different meaning now with blooming COVID. Ugh, horrible.
Oh,
Anything
God, think of that.
Oh, exactly, yeah. Jeez. Anyway, moving on before we get into anything like that. Next up, we've got one of Bristol's finest. He's a super fan of more than just the Dreamcast. And I can't pronounce this, but I'll give it a go. His Mechleth is in the post. Is that close? Is that okay?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. If you don't know what that is, then shame on you. You're a bad Star Wars fan. No, I'm kidding. Don't hurt me. It's the Buffy-loving Bristolian Mike. How are you?
Hello, Andrew. That's an interesting introduction there. Yes, the mention of my Mechleth. I have ordered a Mechleth, which is Worf's personal sword from Star Trek, and it's on the way. And when I get it, I will be putting it on every social media platform I can find.
I'm sure you will.
Mike, is that to go with your life-size cardboard cutout?
I don't have a life-size cardboard cutout of this. It's bizarre, Tom. I haven't got a life-size cutout of Worf. I told you before, Tom. Though, if you want to get me one, feel free.
I think that's the Secret Santa for 2021, right? That's a life-size cardboard cutout. Mm-hmm. Interesting. All right. Well, now on to that special guest. He's more well known these days for his work on the PlayStation, with his last company, Wish Studios, having pioneered the super fun PlayLink platform with games That's You and Knowledge is Power. However, before I'm excommunicated for talking too much about the Sony console, let me bring it back to the Dreamcast. This gentleman is the creator of and original editor of Dreamcast magazine DC UK and the short-lived Mr. Dreamcast. Yes, this is the episode where Daddy Dreamcast meets Mr. Dreamcast. Please welcome Caspar Field. Hello. How are you?
Hello. Yeah, I'm all right. Thanks for having me on.
It's very good to have you on.
You did mention Mr. Dreamcast, though. You had to bring that up.
I did. I have a feeling it might be brought up several times podcast, just to warn you. And just so you know, Tom has been recently branded as Daddy Dreamcast. So we've just kind of got Daddy Dreamcast, Mr. Dreamcast in the same, well, I was going to say in the same room, in the same Skype room, which is an interesting thing for us. So, but yeah, thank you. Welcome to the Dreamcast Junkyard. Before we get into the meat of it, I do have a couple of questions for us all. And the first one is something that Tom had wanted me to ask you, Caspar, but I think that the world needs to know what all of us think about this particular topic. So let me ask you all, what is your favourite flavour of the slag of all snacks, pot noodle? Caspar, pot noodle fan?
Wow. I'll be honest, it's been a while, and I'm vegetarian, but I think they're all vegetarian basically, aren't they? It's like eating beef flavoured crisps, right? They're just
pretty much.
Yeah. So there is a bit. I think the beefy one, if that is vegetarian, I think that one was quite good because I quite like flame grilled McCoys.
Oh, okay.
Which are basically just loads of paprika, I think, and pepper. So
yeah.
That's
true. Tom,
I think I'd have to go for the Bombay Bad Boy myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like a bit of spice. It's not hot enough though. Even still, I have to put a bit more Tabasco in it because I'm just a horrible human.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a separate issue to the pot noodle thing. Mike, what about yourself?
Yeah, so my favourite would be sweet and sour. I'm also vegetarian, as are you, Andrew, or vegan. So only Tom is dirty meat eater in this podcast. But sweet and sour or curry.
Curry's the best. I had a curry one before this very podcast because me and Tom have been talking about it. I went to the shops earlier and I found one of those king size curry pot noodles. And I had it for lunch, and oh my goodness, it is great. But like when me and Tom were talking about it, there's never enough mango sauce in the curry ones.
No.
This is a nice kind of glimpse behind the curtain as well as about what we talk about off the podcast. Pot noodles.
Yeah, we don't talk about the Dreamcast. We just talk about pot noodles all day. That's hilarious. The other question that I've got for everybody, just to bring it back to normality slightly, is what we've all been playing recently. If we've been playing some games, Caspar, I'll start with you. What games have you been playing recently?
So I've been playing the Sackboy game, the new one, Sackboy: A Big Adventure, with my daughter. My daughter's 9, and it's brilliant. I think it owes quite a lot to Yoshi's Woolly World, which was the last thing that we played, like an adventure type thing we played together. But it's really fun. It's got a real joy to it, and a lot of games that are made for sort of kids and families to play, I think actually are way too hard. And that so far has been quite a gentle intro to it. And it's got a lot of crazy little touches, like at the end of every level, whoever scored the most points, it takes like a little selfie of your Sackboy.
Yeah.
But the other player's Sackboy can photobomb it whilst it's being done. and you can slap them down while they're trying to do it. So you end up having a big fight trying to have your photo taken at the end of the game. It's got loads of cool stuff like that. It's been really good fun so far.
That reminds me of one of the Super Mario Party mini games. I don't know if you've played that, but there's one where you have to get into like a paparazzi photo, and you're all like struggling to get into the middle of the shot. It sounds quite like that. So that sounds really fun. Right. Like me and my niece and nephew play that one, and it's always hilarious trying to get into shot. So it sounds really fun. So you have a PlayStation 5 then? You're one of the lucky ones who's managed to get a PS5.
It's actually PS4. It's on PS4 as well.
Is it? Oh, okay.
It's one of those. It runs on both, right? So Mike,
what about yourself? What have you been playing?
So I haven't been playing much the last few months. I've been playing one game because I'm slightly obsessed with it, which is Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I haven't played Assassin's Creed games really that much in the past. Played Origins for a little bit, played some of the early ones. But Valhalla sort of spoke to me. It's a subject matter that's really interesting to me, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm over 100 hours into the game now, and I'm sure it's got many of the problems that AAA games have in terms of repeated themes and styles from old Assassin's Creed games, but it's just really good fun. Sort of a nice game I know it's not a game you necessarily think you would be able to chill out with, but for me it's something you can chill out with. Just discover sort of random places in England, which is also where the game's set. So I spent far too long trying to work out where my town would be on the map. Which is obviously slightly the map's not quite accurate. So I've climbed a hill in Gloucester, and that's where I am.
It sounds a bit like has anybody here played Watch Dogs Legion at all? They've got like the representation of London. So I spent far too long trying to find my old office in London, like so long. Like it's not there because it's not a proper London, but so annoying. But yeah, I totally know what you mean. And you're pretty much a Viking, Mike, anyway, right? So that's
exactly, yeah. That's what it is.
Why it appeals so much. Cool. It just seemed very good. Tom, what have you been playing?
Yeah, so I've been playing a game called Metro Exodus. I say playing. I picked it up on, I think it was the day after New Year's Day, and then I played it solidly for a week and finished it because it was just a really, really cool first-person shooter. I was a big fan of the original games on the 360, Metro 2033 and Metro Last Light, and then this one popped up here, and I was playing it on the Series X. It's not been enhanced in any way, but there is an enhancement coming out for it. But I've finished it now, and I was telling myself, don't complete it. Wait until the enhanced version comes out, because then you can play it with all the nice kind of ray tracing and everything. But it's that good. I just kind of got sucked into it, and I ended up finishing it. So whether or not I'll go back to it when the enhanced edition comes out, I don't know. But there's quite a few DLCs for it, so I'll probably pick those up and maybe jump back in. But yeah, really cool first-person shooter with lots of tactical elements. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you love that game. Like, it's one of the whenever we were talking about games in our chat, it would just kind of come up. So I've got no doubt that you'll go back to that when you just want to play it again and again by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I mean, I actually went and bought the books as well. I mean, I know
wow.
It was based on a novel, but I was that engrossed in the game. I thought, right, I want to see where this has all come from. So I went and bought the books. And now I'm halfway through the first book as well. So yeah, it's actually encouraged me to read again, which is not something I've done for a while. So yeah, who says games can't be educational as well, you know?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you said when you got my book, you were like, "Oh, this is the first time I've read for ages." I'm like, "Oh, thanks."
I think
encouraging.
Your book was the last one I read before this one. So a nice plug as well, by the way. So
yeah, got to get the plug in there somewhere. Caspar's in there as well. You know, it's like there's been a while. That came out in February last year. Can you believe that? That's a long time ago.
I don't even know what dates are now. You know, I don't know what time is.
No, it's I haven't really been playing much. I've been modding consoles to allow me to play things in the future. I just haven't been like I was modding a Wii yesterday, like doing a soft mod on a Wii to kind of allow me to back up that you can rip Wii and GameCube games to it and then just play them directly from a hard drive. You can do other things too. I won't go into any details about what those things would be here. But yeah, so you can rip your games and not have to use the disc, which is pretty awesome. It just means that you can keep your discs nice and pristine.
I thought I'd seen that, just to jump in, I thought I'd seen that once, that you can actually get a thing for Dreamcast that lets you have like a solid state drive in it or something.
There are several. Yeah, there's like GDMU, and I've got a thing with a flash card reader in the side of it. So there's plenty of options if that's what you want to do. You can even get one with it. You can actually put a full size, mechanical hard drive inside a Dreamcast if you want to. I wouldn't recommend it just because of the noise of the fans and the hard drive.
Yeah, it'd be great if you could put a disc into the Dreamcast and rip it. Like, that's literally what you can do with the Wii. You put the disc in and it rips it to the hard drive, but you'd have to do that on a computer, I guess, wouldn't you?
You can on the CF card reader, can't you?
You can, yeah. You can do it using a thing called Dream Shell. You can actually rip GD-ROMs from the disc if you so desire.
Pretty cool.
So yeah.
Awesome. There you go. Learn something new every day. All right, so let's get down to it. And let's have a chat about, what Caspar was doing, what you were doing, Caspar, in the late 90s, early 2000s, which was games journalism. And I thought it might be a good place to start, just kind of letting us know, kind of chatting through how DC UK came into existence in the first place. Because I believe it started out life as a pitch for the official magazine, right?
Yeah, so let me get the timeline right. So it must have been early... So Dreamcast, this is terrible, isn't it? Dreamcast came out in the UK in 1999, right? Mm-hmm. So I think I went to... So I was trying to start at the start and make sense of this. So I was deputy editor of Edge in 1998, and Sega had decided at some point that because they decided that Edge hated the Saturn, I think, before my time there. And so there was kind of like this weird standoff where Sega wasn't really talking to Edge and Edge wasn't really talking to Sega. And we tried to have a bit of a rapprochement, and they sort of were murmuring that there was something new coming, and we should maybe be excited about it and get involved with it. And after a bit more talking, that eventually led to me being invited to go to Tokyo for something being announced. And so I flew out with them and all of the senior team from Europe, and we stayed at the New Atani Hotel in Tokyo and went to the launch party for what immediately became apparent was the Dreamcast. And so having done that sort of led on to Edge having a much better relationship with Sega, because I came back quite excited about the Dreamcast, and I think Sega at the time knew that the Saturn had obviously some difficulties and knew that it wasn't quite the right product for the time, and they really wanted to make amends and get it right this time round. And So much so that at one point they were thinking about dropping the Sega branding from the Dreamcast completely. And so we ran the cover line on Edge when I got back, which was "Sega is dead, long live Dreamcast," which freaks Sega out a bit, I think. So they got copies in the office and they were like, "No!" But then once they started reading, they realised that we actually really liked the idea of it. But anyway, having done all of that, obviously put me in a good position at Future. I kind of became Future's Dreamcast expert. And so when they were talking about doing an official Dreamcast magazine, I was asked to put the beginnings of a team together and get some ideas together for what became the pitch for it. I'm trying to think exactly the sequence of events, but it basically was that there was a bit of a thing where Sony wasn't massively happy about Future potentially doing the official Dreamcast magazine, I think, because right back then, Future's official PlayStation magazine was selling 500,000 copies a month, and which is just like unimaginable these days. And I think on top of that, I think just the idea I think that having too many official magazines in one publishing house at the time seemed a bit of a weird idea. So I think Sega really liked the pitch, but in the end it went to Dennis, as you know, and so we took the pitch and turned it into what became DC UK. And it was quite good because we were freed up a little bit from all the Sega being too close to Sega and having to get everything approved by them, which they did, the official magazine. And so we just ran with it and had a lot of fun with it and did a lot of daft things. And yeah, it was, I guess if anyone's read it or know, certainly those early issues, we did some really silly things with it. And
yeah, I guess it was a blessing in disguise then, really, not getting the official license, because it allowed, as you say, it allowed you to do what you wanted, kind of thing.
Yeah, it was definitely. It was a bit disappointing. It would have been lovely to get it, but the first issue. I mean, this shows how much time has passed, right? The first issue of DC UK came with a cover VHS.
I think, Andrew, you've been watching that this week, haven't you?
It was the official Dreamcast magazine VHS, unfortunately, rival publication that I watched. But yeah, I got a VHS player recently because I'm going all retro, and that's it's weird. It's weird to go back and watch stuff on VHS, like just bizarre. But the ODM one was like an official. It was almost like an official pitch. I'm guessing the DC UK one was a bit more, because I've not seen it yet. Was it a bit more of a fun kind of video about the Dreamcast? Or
we just really wanted to show everyone what a step up it was, right, from the generation before. So we got loads of game trailers basically from all the publishers, and just put as many trailers as we could from them and bits and pieces we got from Japan, and just really tried to show what the console could do, I guess, before it came out in the UK. And you got to remember that obviously the internet in 1999 was, these were the days where you're waiting for a JPEG to download still, I think. Right?
Yeah. Still, I'm in my house, to be honest.
Yeah, it was quite fun. I'm quite competitive. I quite enjoyed trying to beat the official Dreamcast magazine then at various bits and pieces. So we managed to. My favourite was that we got an American Dreamcast imported with a copy of the American release of Soul Calibur, because I knew that we could get it and get the review done and get it onto newsstands because of when our dates fell, ahead of when the UK official Dreamcast magazine could get an official UK bit of code from Sega. And I think we beat them out with the first English language review in the UK by about a week and a half. And I know the editor at the time was furious about it. So that was quite gratifying.
A win, yeah.
I mean, you said you've said in the interview in Dreamcast Year 1, you were good friends with Ed Lomas, who of course was over at official Dreamcast magazine. Was he feeding you information then from over there, going, "Oh, he's really mad," like giving you kind of tips? And
Ed and I just we were kind of journalist drinking buddies. And then after I'd left Future and I'd moved to London, I was then working out what I was going to do next in my life. And Ed and I ended up getting a flat together. But luckily it was long after the sort of rivalry, and I'd moved on from then. In fact, it was after even doing Mr. Dreamcast.
Wow.
So
so no kind of sly tips that to get you ahead of the game.
Oh.
No, never mind.
No, but I did some reviews for this official Dreamcast magazine in the end, because we were flatmates. He was kind of like, well, I need someone who knows about Dreamcast stuff and can write reviews. Do you want to help? So
nice.
Let's keep a bit of beer money on the side.
Yeah, it's not too bad. You did Grandia 2, I believe was one of the reviews that you did done. Yeah.
There's a terrible pun in the strapline. There's still some joke about having some extra sugar in your tea, Grandia, or something.
That is that is a pretty bad pun. Oh dear. But I mean, with DCUK, then there was quite a few weird and wonderful features. Like I've seen the one of you kind of basically just all getting together and drinking around somebody's house and playing games together. That was kind of odd for the time. And you had body parts where you just photographed different parts of the people who worked there's like faces or bodies. Like where did you come up with those kind of ideas?
In the pub, funnily enough. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think we were just. So it was the days, obviously, of like Loaded and FHM were in their heyday and selling even more than the official Dreamcast magazine, sort of pushing on for 1 million copies a month, I think. And so that flavour of journalism was trickling down to all sorts of things, and it trickled down to games magazines. And sort of, I suppose, our take on it was that we wanted to give a games magazine some of that sort of slightly gonzo journalism. We don't care, we'll do anything stupid feel. And so, and we were trying to take ideas and things from the game to then just turn them into fun things that we would do. So probably the daftest was that we decided to try and go bass fishing when Get Bass came out. And I somehow managed to get some of the team to go down to Padstow and get on a boat and go bass fishing. But it was like, they stayed in a hotel the night before and got horribly drunk. And then it was Keith, Stewart, and Esther went, I think, and a photographer friend of mine, Nick, and there might have been one other from the team, and they all went down basically, got horribly drunk, then got on this boat and tried to go bass fishing off the coast, and they were just like, there's a photo of them all throwing up simultaneously over the side of the boat. So it was kind of tenuous, but quite funny.
It's interesting you mentioned things like FHM and Maxim, because I think that period of journalism, or certainly games journalism, it was very kind of laddish. That's the kind of impression that I get, certainly reading them at the time as well. There was almost like a sort of an aspiration to be like the journalists in the magazine, certainly for me anyway, going off doing things like you say, bass fishing, and I remember there was one in CBG where they all went paintballing, and it was like, yeah, I want to do that stuff. They're cool. These journals are really cool. I want to do that stuff and play games as well, So it's an interesting comparison.
Completely right. I mean, it was probably the best thing personally for me was that after I'd left, I did a feature for Keith when he was editor of DC UK on Metropolis Street Racer, and I was living in London. It was summer 2000, and I was like, okay, well, let's see if we can get a car and like recreate some of these courses around London, right? Really responsibly. And so I rang up Mazda's press department and went, I'm going to do this feature, games magazine feature. Will you give me a car? Like thinking they'd just like laugh at me. And they went, yeah, okay, we'll drop it off on Monday. So Monday morning, this nice man came round to this house that I was living at and dropped off a brand new Mazda MX-5, banana yellow one. And just like went, oh, here's the keys, mate. Yeah, see you in a week. And just walked off.
Wow.
And I was like, what?
That's just amazing. Can you imagine? That would not happen now, would it? It's just amazing.
It's incredible. Like, didn't want any ID. It was like, yeah, fine, here you go. So me and another photographer, a guy called Jude, who used to shoot a lot of stuff for Edge at the time, and he was in London. So me and Jude just went down to like drive it all around central London. We did laps of Trafalgar Square when you used to be able to go right round it. Then backed the car up into the middle of Trafalgar Square and started taking photos of it until someone went ballistic and told us to leave. And it was crazy. But it was good fun.
Do you know, the only thing that could have made that better is if you'd had the soundtrack from MSR on a disc playing in the CD player, like
real life Metropolis Street Racer. Yeah. With DC UK then, kind of looking back at that, I mean, I remember when me and you met the first time, we met in an ice cream parlour in the middle of Brighton. It was like end of 2018, I believe. Good
ice cream, but a bit expensive, I would say.
It was expensive. Yeah, it was expensive. I've been there since, and now I'm vegan now, so they don't do vegan ice cream, so I'm out of luck for that place, unfortunately. But we kind of were sat there and looking through DC UK magazines, and I remember you specifically telling me about how you left the magazine. And you were kind of half worried and half not worried about like people finding out about what you'd done, which kind of leads us into Mr. Dreamcast a bit. But can you tell us a little bit about what it was like to leave DC UK?
So
I'm intrigued as to what you did. What could it be?
I think, well, I knew that. So basically, this guy, I got introduced to this guy that wanted to do some sort of gamers magazine thing, and Dreamcast, like late 1999, it just seemed like it was really going right. It was really like there was a lot of enthusiasm about it. The games were great. It was before PS2 had really been announced properly. I don't know, when we were talking about what to do, we were like trying to think of gaps in the market, and you've got to think back and remember that. I mean, the games magazine market was like, I mean, anything was selling. There was just so much enthusiasm for gaming, and pre-internet, that was where people got all their news. So we sort of thought, well, what if we tried to go a little bit younger? Because there's a lot of Dreamcast magazines out already. We could try and do that and see if we can find a gap there. And so that was sort of the kernel of what became Mr. Dreamcast. So we'd had this idea, and the guy was offering me, like, I mean, games journalism have never been brilliantly paid, but at the time it was not great down at Future. And the guy kind of offered to double my salary and move me up to London to do this thing. And I was like, oh, that's really tempting. And my girlfriend at the time was living in southeast London. And so I said I'd do it. And so in preparation for it, I did things like I sent Keith Stewart on a training course on how to run magazines. I booked him in for it and just said, oh, you should really do this. I think it'd be really good for you to learn more about kind of like the management sort of editorial side of it. And he was like, I don't, why are you making me do this? I don't understand. I was like, no, just honestly trust me, mate. You should really do it. I think it'd be really good for you.
Development, character building.
Yeah, exactly. And then meantime, I bought I think it was a 250 megabyte or 200 megabyte external hard drive, and I had it hooked up under my desk at Future and was just quietly copying like all the good graphic assets and screenshots and bits and pieces that I could onto this hard drive under the desk. And sort of, and it was like the great escape. Sort of every day I'd sort of quietly take it home like another thing off my desk in my bag, so it wasn't too obvious. And thin it down and down and down and down. And then when I knew, because basically that when I told them I was going to go and start a rival, that they would just kick me out of Future straight away, which is what happened. So they fired me on the spot, basically, and put me on gardening leave. And so the night before, I'd kind of gone in, got my last few pieces, got the hard drive, and then snuck out of the building. And then afterwards, Keith was like, oh, I get it now. Oh, right, so that's why you were going to do all these training courses. I was like, yeah, that's right. So kind of that was it. It was like a long, probably about a month of subterfuge building up to doing it.
That's amazing. I've got images of like, that scene in Mission Impossible where he hangs from the ceiling and puts the discs in the computer, but rather than like a CIA knock list, it's like assets from Power Stone or Soul Calibur.
I'd have thought, because you mentioned just before that you did you did a feature for DC UK when Keith was editor. I'd have thought that you'd have burnt all your bridges at Future for kind of leaving and doing that. Was that not the case then?
I think they did forgive me. They nearly didn't forgive me, because when we did Mr. Dreamcast, I did a flyering campaign, and I paid someone to put billboard posters all around there was a closed shop underneath Future's office, and I got them to deliberately go and billboard poster underneath Future with Mr. Dreamcast coming soon posters, just to wind them up.
It's brilliant.
Goodness. Yeah, you're lucky that they didn't hold a grudge.
The only way that story could be better is if, when you'd done a feature for Keith after you'd left, you'd done it under a pseudonym, like Mr. Dreamcast or something like that,
So I guess, I mean, Tom, you've been very curious about Mr. Dreamcast, so we're kind of towards that part now. So I guess is there anything in particular you wanted to ask Caspar about Mr. Dreamcast?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say this now, Caspar. For me, Mr. Dreamcast represents the pinnacle of your work, and I say that unironically. I actually bought a copy of Mr. Dreamcast not knowing that it was aimed at a younger audience. I was waiting for a bus. I was going to go and see my dad. I went into a shop, into a newsagent's, and I saw this magazine that I'd never seen before. And I thought, I'll get that because I'll just give it a chance. It's something to read on the bus. It was only when I was on the bus that I was reading through it, I realised that it should have had a water pistol attached to the front cover, and there was no water pistol. And I was too far away now to get off the bus and go back to claim my free water pistol. Well, I'm going to let that slide for now.
I thought you were about to ask Caspar for your water pistol. Where's my water pistol, Caspar?
But no, joking aside, I mean, that magazine has long gone since. But I mean, I've been looking back at Mr. Dreamcast online, the scans that you can find online of it, and with an adult head looking at it, it's actually a really well put together magazine. And there's a lot of information in there, even though it's aimed at kids. There's things like guides on how to copy your VMUs, loads of really kind of bright, attractive graphics. And I just wonder, I mean, you've already answered one of my questions about how it all came about. One of the things I'd like to know is, why did it end after only 2 issues? And as a sort of an additional question, was issue 3 ever sort of started? Was it ever in production? Does it exist?
Well, it's nice that, thank you for saying nice things about it. And I joke about it now, but we tried really hard when we did it, because at the time a lot of kids magazines for games were very, very throwaway. And without naming names, I remember reading a review in one of them when we were thinking about how to do it, and they'd reviewed, I can't remember what, it was something wildly inappropriate, like Resident Evil in a kids games, ostensibly kids magazine. And the review was just this stupid anecdote about something the writer had done that was vaguely related to Resident Evil, and there was like no information. It was really throwaway and I remember sitting there with John Jordan and Craig and Camilla when we were thinking about how to do it, and saying, like, I remember being a kid and just I wanted information. I wanted it to be fun, but I really wanted to. You want to know stuff, don't you? It's like you have all these. Like my boy's 12, and I got him a book on like the tank book, it's called. I got him that for Christmas, and it's just like 48,000 facts about tanks with loads of pictures of tanks and bits, and he's just hoovering it up. And my daughter was the same. They just want to learn stuff and know stuff. And so we're like, well, let's try and do a games magazine for kids where we're not being stupid. Well, we are having fun, but we're like actually telling them loads of information and how to do things, and treat them a little bit more with a bit more respect, I suppose. And I still, when I look back at it, I think we got that it came across quite well, I think, that intent.
I'd agree with you on that front, because looking at things like the guides to the internet and how to use the browser for the Dreamcast, and terminology was around the internet at the time, I just think it's a really good resource. We can look, as you say, we can laugh about Mr. Dreamcast and say, oh, it's a kids magazine kind of thing, but in actual fact, there is some pretty good information in there. So, kudos, really.
Yeah, thanks. But I mean, to answer your questions, yeah, we did start on issue 3. I have no idea what happened to the files. We were just starting work on it when the money ran out, and the reason we stopped is because the guy who asked me to start the magazine and who put the money into it, he just really struggled to hire someone to do ad sales. Ironically, now, like Mr. Dreamcast, compared to a lot of contemporary games magazines, sold pretty well. I think we sold about, I think it was like 12.5 to 14,000 copies of the first issue, which, considering it was like we had no promotional budget really, and we had no way of really marketing it, and the second issue was similar, so they both sold pretty well, but they just didn't have enough advertising in them to help sort of get things rolling and get pay for future issues coming through. It was a shame, because we had loads of ideas to do other things as well, and we'd spent a lot of time kind of getting everything set up. And we had some good writers, like Paul Rose, Mr. Biffo, did some writing for us.
It's interesting you mentioned Paul, actually, because I messaged him this morning on Twitter asking him if he remembers anything about Mr. Dreamcast, and he said he couldn't, but he said to say hello and that you're a lovely chap. So,
that's very kind. Yeah, no, he did. I can't remember. He did some reviews, I think, for us. So yeah, it's a shame it didn't carry on. I can't remember what we were doing for the third cover either. We did have something in mind, because it was Fur Fighters for the first one, then Wacky Races for the second one. I can't remember what the third one was going to be.
It's interesting because there is quite a big community online surrounding like magazines and the collection of magazines, and also magazines that never came out. I don't know if you know this, but Rapid Publishing at the time were going to launch their own Dreamcast magazine called Total Dreamcast, and the magazine was actually advertised in other magazines like Total Control, but then the magazine never came out, but it's quite well known that it actually did get not produced, but the files that the magazine itself was completed. Issue 1 was complete.
Right.
And I spoke to one of your contemporaries, Simon Phillips, who was the editor of Dreamcast magazine for was it Imagine Publishing at the time, and he told me that he reckons he's got a copy of Total Dreamcast in his garage, and that he needs to go and have a look for it. And I pestered him several times, but then he just stopped responding because I think he got sick of me. But so issue 3 of Mr. Dreamcast and issue 1 of Total Dreamcast sort of represent this kind of golden fleece. They're like the golden fleece almost of Dreamcast magazines that never were.
God, I can't. Yeah, I wonder what happened to it, because I did have the stuff for a while. I remember at one point the Camilla, who was the production editor. I remember I think it might have been her machine or someone's machine. The hard drive started to die in the middle of trying to make an issue, which was back in the days when technology was much less reliable. And I don't know what happened to it all. It's funny though, because that stuff is still kicking around. Because you've got to remember, like when I was at Edge in between 97 and 99, Edge was the first magazine I think at Future that went to press via PDF. So prior to that, when I first got there, we were still sending stuff on film. Wow. So you'd like send it off to the repro room, and it would take hours. I mean, literally hours to get processed at the repro room, and then it'd come out on acetate films with 4-color separation. And because it was Edge, sometimes it'd have 5th and 6th color prints, right? So really complicated printing techniques. So you basically send it all down to print. And me and my friend Terry, who was the art editor, who we're still mates now. So me and Terry would end up would go to the pub and just sit and wait for the films to come out after sending it. But sometimes it'd be like 3 or 4 hours. So you just sit and drink for 3 hours. And then go down to the repro room and then be looking at these like sheets of acetate with the different color separations on, like blearily looking at it in this basement repro room, trying to work out what's what and whether there's any typos before you send it off to have 30,000 copies printed, sort of stuff. Wow.
One other thing, Caspar, just very quickly, leading on from the question about the third issue of Mr. Dreamcast, there was a comic strip called The Pool in Mr. Dreamcast. Do you remember that?
Oh my God!
It's a little comic strip, like a little black and white printed thing about the character Mr. Dreamcast and his kind of band of friends, and there's only two episodes of it, and so I'll never know what happened to Mr. Dreamcast and his friends.
I should ask Craig. I tell you who I don't know if he would have it. Craig, the art editor, who went on to have a totally stellar career. So Craig was like, he was someone at Future Publishing and management took against him, and like really held him. Well, the story goes that they held him back, right? And so but he was actually a fantastic art guy and such a lovely geezer. And so he came down and did Mr. Dreamcast with me, and then after that went on to just have this amazing career. So he was art editor of Loaded at one point, and then moved to New York and was art editor of I think Maxim USA or something something like that. And and then he went on and launched a creative agency of his own, which he had for about 10 years. So he's kind of more of a collector type of guy. I might ask him if he's still got the files. I'll see what he says.
Yeah, I'd love to know what happens at the end of because at the end of episode 2, the world's been zapped by the evil Zorlon. So and
of course,
I'm itching to know what happens next.
Right.
Sorry, Andrew. I feel like I've hijacked this conversation with talk of Mr. Dreamcast and
hijack away. It's fine. It feels like another one of your investigative pieces waiting to happen here, Tom. Trying to track down the end of Mr. Dreamcast, the comic book and the final issue. Maybe we'll find something.
Just grabbing my Deerstalker now as we speak.
I've got a crate in the loft that's got all my old magazine stuff in it. I'll go and poke around and see what's in there, because at one point I had loads of stuff on zip disks, if you remember those, the 100 megabyte floppy disk things, and then I managed to USB sticks got good enough that I found an old Mac with a zip disk in it, and I managed to copy everything onto USB before the disks all failed. That might be the last time I had access to all that stuff. I'll go and have a look. The other thing I've got in the loft that is, in terms of rare Dreamcast publications, is the supplement that I did for Edge, which was, if you like facts about Dreamcast, that's worth digging out if you can ever find one. And I think that might be scanned online, actually. I think I might have come across it once. It was like issue 60 something. It was about 2 or 3 issues after we'd done the cover. And yeah, we decided to do a supplement, and it was like a big square supplement just about Dreamcast. And that has got some great stuff in it. Like, I interviewed a guy who was the original hardware designer for Dreamcast. And in that, he's talking about how they almost put a DVD player in it. And it was like a real, cost-wise, it was like, I think they could either do the modem or do the DVD, something like that. And so it was like a real 50-50 as to which. And I always wondered whether, I think so many people bought PS2 because it was also a DVD player. I wonder if Dreamcast had had that and not the modem, or if the modem had been an add-on, whether it would have been a different story a little bit. Because I knew so many people at the time, it was like, well, a DVD player is 100 quid and a PS2 is 200 quid or whatever it was. I might as well spend the extra and get both, sort of thing.
Yeah. There was, I can't remember which shop it was, but at one point there was a shop that was basically giving you a free DVD player with the Dreamcast, if I remember rightly. Yeah, I think that was the case. Just to try and get the Dreamcast out the door.
Wow.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, yeah, definitely. When you've maybe April, spring cleaning time, get up in the attic, clear all out, show us what you got. Be awesome. Thinking back to, I think one question I had about DC UK is, so obviously you did the first 6 issues and you'd started the 7th before you'd left, from what I remember. And so the first 6 issues are very distinct in the fact that, you've got the reviews at the front, you've got, you gave each issue a title as well, which they completely stopped doing after issue 6. Where did the titles for the issues come from? What made you decide to title each issue?
What were they? Are they on the spine or something? I can't remember.
Yeah, hang on. I've got them next to me. Let me read them 1 second. So we've got... I'm trying to move my mic so it doesn't make a big noise. So the first issue is the cake issue. Then issue 2 is the knockout issue. Issue 3 was the fish issue, which is good to say. Then you had the birthday issue, the party issue, the vroom issue, and then the epic issue. And then after that, they stopped titling them.
The cakes might have been Esther. Esther was what was her job title? Associate editor? I can't remember. I think she had quite a heavy cake influence on us. And then, and then the birthday issue. With that, what month was that?
I know it was the 4th issue. Hang on. No, that was the 5th issue. Sorry, I'm reading them out of order. Oh, this is bad. So I recently took ownership of a complete collection of DC UK. So I only had a few issues before, and they all come in lovely, plastic, just so you can hear it.
Okay.
Let me take this out. This is the first time I'm taking these out of plastic.
No, don't open it. You can't do that.
I need to read them. I've got research to do, Caspar. I'm writing another book. Let me have a look.
I think that's probably the first time a magazine editor has told somebody not to read his own magazine.
I just thought they're individually cling filmed. You can't open. There's you've literally halved the value now by doing that.
I know, they're very good quality. Somebody's kept them in very good nick. So sorry. So we're looking at the birthday issue was street release date. December 1999.
I don't know. My birthday's at the end of October. It could just literally have been a self-indulgent. We would have been making that around the time it was my birthday. So.
Oh, okay.
Would have been the 1 year for Dreamcast, wouldn't it?
Yeah, because
Japan was December 98.
That's true. Yeah,
there you go. That's a less egotistical answer. That's
We'll just go with yours, Caspar. It was your birthday, and you just wanted to. But yeah, it was interesting that they completely changed the magazine as soon as you left, pretty much. I think issue 7 had kind of, you could see some of your influence still in it, but after that they kind of moved the reviews back to the back of the magazine. And did you? How did you feel about that? Because a lot of that was your influence, wasn't it? They're putting reviews at the front and stuff like that.
Yeah, I can't remember. I got that idea from. Where did I get that idea from? It might have been from Famitsu or something at the time. Did its reviews first, something like that. And obviously, Famitsu was the mega selling Japanese. Well, still going Famitsu, right? Mm-hmm. But then it was selling 500,000 copies a week, I think, in Japan.
Wow.
Something like that. I think they did something like that. I just thought it was really interesting. Just go, well, people. They really want to see the latest reviews and get all the latest stuff. So let's change it around. And also there was, as I was just saying, there was so many games magazines out at the time, and there's still a lot now, but there was bazillions then.
Yeah.
And they all had this same pattern of news, then previews, then feature bits in the middle, maybe, then the reviews, then the tips. And I just was like, well, there's no reason why that is the accepted format. We could do whatever we want. So let's just try it a different way around, see how it feels, and see what people think of it. And so we did that. And the other thing that we did was that I still really like Car magazine, and that's been the one that's been going since the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And Car at the time had a section at the back called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which was like their kind of like a roundup of all the cars that were on sale at the moment. You could see these little micro reviews of them that were quite scathing, some of them. And but they printed the back part of that at the time on a different paper stock, an uncoated paper stock, so you could easily navigate to that bit of the magazine and jump to that section if you wanted to. So I thought, well, that's cool too. So we did that as well, and did the back section of DC UK in uncoated, and then put all the tips and kind of import reviews and things in it. So you kind of moved away from you sort of again knew you were moving into a different sort of section, different phase of the magazine, different kind of information.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. It's very cool.
I was going to say that kind of reminds me of the you know how they had the sort of was it Free Play or the Retro Ranch in CVG at the time? It was like the sort of brown bit in the middle of the magazine.
Yeah.
And that kind of because it was a different size and different kind of paper, you kind of could get easily to it. So yeah, there's a lot of psychology, I suppose, around magazines you don't really think about unless somebody like yourself, Caspar, explains it. You know. So, yeah, cool. In
the early days of DC UK, I just had a desk in a corner of Future, and I just had the whole wall covered with bits of magazines and newspapers that I liked, just bits I'd torn out. And so we tried doing, like in USA Today, they had a weather section that I really liked. It was just really graphic and loads and loads of icons and things all over it. It was just really American, like mega information overload. And so that I had torn out and masking taped on the wall, and that was what became the sort of world news bit in DC UK, where we had the map with all the arrows on it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So all that sort of stuff.
That was cool. The Dreamcast weather map, I think it was called, something along those lines. But yeah, there's just so many cool things, and not to disparage what came after, because of course Keith was the editor after you left, and Keith is a great guy obviously, and has done amazing things, but it did change very much to a standard games magazine when you left. Was that basically Future just saying like Caspar's gone, he's stolen all of our stuff, let's get back to how it should be? I think there was some pressure on Keith to put it back to a standard format. And I think they changed the shape of it slightly as well, because it was cheaper to make it like that shape that I chose was a bit more edge-like, but they needed a slightly more expensive bit of paper because you needed it slightly wider to crop it that way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, all the magazine craft things. It's funny what I can remember still. It's been 20 years more since I made a magazine, but It really stuck with me. Yeah.
Can I ask, just on the topic of like other things that you read? I mean, I think you've already touched on it slightly, but what was it like kind of keeping tabs on the opposition, as it were? Did you kind of get all the other magazines as well and see what they were doing, like Dreamcast Magazine, Dreamcast Monthly, all those kind of, or did you just not bothered, just do your own thing and forget what they do?
Definitely. I suppose in those days, I don't know how it is with journalists now, how much they rely on talking to PR people, but those relationships with the press teams at the different publishers and at Sega was really important. And it was always like a little bit of a game of working out who was getting which exclusive and who was, you sort of trading off, I could give you more pages, or I'll give you the cover, or I'll give you this, that, and the other. And so there's like all this bit of a bartering thing going on. And so it was always good to get the other magazines and see who'd got what and see if anyone beaten you to anything. And like I said, I'm quite competitive, so it was that aspect of it. I was always flicking through them as soon as they came out to see whether they got anything that we hadn't.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Cool.
We also had one thing that helped us is that Tony, the editor of Edge, let me use their Edge's Japanese correspondent for bits and pieces for DC UK. So actually there were two. There was Nicholas originally and a guy called Christophe. And they're both French guys that lived in Tokyo, and they would get stuff for us. So when we did the Soul Calibur cover that came out before the official magazine, I got those guys also had set up an interview at Tokyo Game Show with the Soul Calibur team. So we had like the cover on it, an interview with the guys who made it, and all this like stuff as well that some of the other magazines in the UK you just couldn't get. you know. So it was all about finding those little ways to get an edge over other people, so you could have the best coverage.
Yeah,
definitely
so
a case of like who you know kind of thing rather than what you know. Sorry, Andrew, I keep cutting you off. I apologise.
How dare you, Tom?
I know. I'm going to go flog myself in a minute.
What was I going to say? Yeah, so I guess when you were saying about when you were in Edge and Sega weren't quite so happy with them at the time, so you kind of building that relationship back up really helped as well for DCK, I guess. You got the benefit of of Edge, who had a good relationship with Sega. And I guess did DCK itself, did you guys have a decent relationship with Sega, or were they very much more focused on the official magazine and weren't that fussed about yourselves?
No, they were good actually, because I think they knew. So Mark Hartley was the sort of day-to-day PR guy, and then Mark Maslovich, who went off to have a stellar career at Xbox afterwards. He's still there now, I think, he's in some high up bit of Europe doing something, and something very senior at Xbox. But he, those guys, we still got on well because they sort of recognised that I'd helped build up what the reputation of Dreamcast. You know, I'd been very positive about it in Edge, and that had influenced other people. Mm-hmm. So they helped me when they could. But obviously, their first loyalty had to be to the official magazine.
Tom, I want to move on to the Dreamcast in general, but I think we had another question about features, I believe. I
mean, it was really just about, was there anything that you kind of had in the pipeline or had planned that was either too ridiculous or outlandish, or that the potential budget kind of put an end to? Anything that you can remember that was a bit off the wall kind of thing?
Keith did the Dreamcast cocktails in the first issue. They were good.
Remember those?
I'm trying to. He basically went down to a local bar and got the barista to kind of, not barista, that's not right, bartender. Got the bartender to like work out these quite a good. I guess they call them a mixologist now, would they? Is that right? Is that
I think so. Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, is that a thing? So anyway, that person, helped him come up with these like a Sonic themed cocktail and a Knuckles one, I think, and something else. And but Keith drank all of them, of course, to test them, just to make sure they're okay. He just came back absolutely legless. And
a lot of these stories end with you all kind of slightly tipsy or rather drunk.
There was a journalist culture in the 90s was a lot of booze and a lot of free lunches. Mm-hmm. You know, so and it was kind of a weird thing actually. It actually was one of the reasons why I decided to move on from it, was because we were all paid terribly, but then living this weird sort of, I wouldn't say playboy lifestyle, that's not quite right, but being taken some very, very expensive restaurants, you know, and wined and dined, and then you go back to like, I mean, when I first started at Edge, I couldn't afford a flat, so I was lodging with a teacher and his son in Bath.
Wow.
You know, so you're kind of like being flown on first class jets around the world, and then going back to being a lodger because that's all you can afford, and eating baked beans on toast. It was too much like cognitive dissonance, that thing, right? It was like, I can't cope with this. I'd actually just like to earn enough money to have a nice house of my own.
That'd be nice.
I can just imagine it. One minute you sat at like the launch party of the Sega Dreamcast, and the next minute you're like scrabbling around for, you know, some change to buy a loaf of bread. It's like, it just doesn't add up, does it? It doesn't fit together well. Yeah.
When I was at Edge, a friend of mine in London was in a subsidised flat. She was at the Royal College of Art, and she wanted to go away for the summer. So I basically like sublet her flat off her. And this flat was like unbelievable. It was in Mayfair, right in the heart of London. Wow. But a tiny little flat in the top of this building. It was actually above a strip club. You had to go up past the strip club to go to the flat. Anyway, so like I was living in this flat, and it was super cheap. It was like 300 quid a month or something ridiculous, but still like quite skint, and you know, like just sort of getting by it. And then Acclaim flew me to America to review a game, and I got picked up from this flat in a black limo, came to the door, drove me to the celebrity entrance of Heathrow, which I didn't know was a thing, but there's like they take you up a secret side passage bit, and there's like a secret entrance, then you go straight into the first class lounge, and then flown upper class on Virgin to America, and all this amazing treatment, then all the way back to, and I literally got back and I just had no money to buy food or anything, because it was just so weird. It was like I shouldn't complain. I'm not complaining about it because it was an amazing experience. So many amazing experiences, but ultimately you kind of want to go. I also want to have a normal life. And
Yeah.
you know, I was on like 10 grand a year or something at Edge. You know, something I can't remember, but it was when you're living in Bath, that doesn't go very far.
Wow. And those, like I said, those were the days when magazines were generally selling really well. So I can't even imagine how bad that must be now. I mean, you know, Edge magazine is it's kind of like the last bastion of gaming journalism now, right? Like everything else has fallen away. Official Xbox magazine no longer exists. Official PlayStation magazine's hanging in there just about, and Edge is kind of just the only one that I even know of in terms of game journalism in the magazine world. I don't even want to think what those guys get paid, considering how many copies they must sell, which I don't think is very many. But there you go. Do you still read Edge now? Is this something you still get?
No, I've not read it. I bought, they had an anniversary like last year maybe, like issue so many 100, 300 or something, 400 or something crazy. I think I bought that one. I think it's tough. I mean, you're saying it now, right? That there's not a lot of money, so the teams are very small to make something like Edge. You know, like when Edge was going well, we had probably there'd be sort of like 8 or 9 of us on it.
What, all full time kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah. Plus a good freelance budget to get some really good people working on it, and think now there's about 3 or 4 of them making it. I mean, it's tough. It was exhausting then, so God knows what it's like now.
Yeah. It's a shame. I mean, I think Future is the only magazine publisher left standing that does gaming related stuff as well, because they've got official PlayStation, they've got Edge, and they've got Retro Gamer, of course, which I think Retro Gamer is probably their best selling one, I'd imagine at this point. But yeah, it's sad the way that the magazine industry has gone, and it's a result of the internet and being able to get your information anytime you want rather than having to wait until the end of a month to grab a magazine. But yeah, it's a shame. I think there's a lot of people, as Tom was saying earlier, that still love physical media and magazines. I mean, it's you've moved on since, of course. You now develop games for a living. You went was it Argonaut, I believe you started at, and then
started at Argonaut at the end of 2000, and then was there, and then I went to SCI Games, which was a small publisher in London that through an amazing deal managed to buy IDOS. So I kind of ended up working at IDOS I started at SCI when it was like 70 people, and when I left IDOS then was about 2,000 or something worldwide.
Yeah.
So that was quite an experience. And then I took a sabbatical and went to live in China for a year or so. And then I moved back and started work at Relentless Software in Brighton in 2007. And I was executive producer of the Buzz games on PS3. And then, we started Wish Studios in 2012 and did the Playlink stuff, like you said earlier. So we came up with Playlink and made the first few games for it. And it's been a busy, good 20 years since.
Yeah, very much so.
Magazine days.
A lot of stuff. I mean, with all of that, would you ever go back to doing journalism, magazine work? You did mention there was a mention when there was kind of talk about a Dreamcast Mini potentially being a thing, and I think you and Keith were kind of saying, oh, maybe we could do like a reunion, a DC UK reunion. Is that something you'd ever actually do? Or
I think it's we did talk I think there was quite a good reaction on Twitter when I said it. I think maybe Keith's a much better writer than me. I mean, he's like on his 4th book at the moment, I think, or 3rd. It's just his 3rd book's about to come out. But he's always been a fantastic features writer. But he's also annoyingly fast at it, you know. So he used to do. He was a staff writer at Edge before I was there, and then he left and went freelance. And he'd come in and he'd do these amazing features, and I'd be sort of like still cutting my teeth and trying to get up to speed with it. And then Keith would come in and write sort of like 14 pages in about a day and a half. Be like, oh, you know.
No animosity there whatsoever.
No, it was fine.
No business.
No. No, we stayed really good friends. I still see Keith, so it's
that's good.
It's nice.
Caspar, can I just quickly ask, did the amazing Red Dog Superior Firepower have any sway on you joining Argonaut, or is it just completely random?
The true story is that through doing Edge, I interviewed quite a lot of interesting people in the industry, as you might imagine.
Yeah.
I kind of knew Jez San from interviewing him, and then got to know him quite well. And I was sort of wondering what to do with myself. And he was like, well, actually, God, you just reminded me. Yeah, so the connection was actually Red Dog was a connection. And what happened was that Jez contracted me to to do like an appraisal of Red Dog, because they had the IP. They actually owned the IP in the game, and Sega didn't. And they were contemplating doing a PS2 version of it.
Oh, wow.
And so they paid me to do like an appraisal of the game and what I thought could be improved if they were going to redo it as a PS2 release. And they really liked that. And then that led to them saying, well, why don't you come in for a job interview? We're looking for new producers with taking like a bit of a different angle on game production. And we really like your ideas. And obviously you've got kind of some management experience from managing a magazine team. So why don't you come in? And I got the job, and that was how I got started.
Wow, that was literally just a joke. I didn't realise that there was any kind of relevance to Red Dog. But yeah,
my other favourite thing about Red Dog, is so the lead designer of Red Dog was Sefton Hill, and Sefton was one of the two co-founders of Rocksteady Games, who did the Batman games.
Mm-hmm.
Sefton's he's a lovely, lovely guy, and so I still now and again swap texts with him very off and on. I've not seen him for years now, but he when they did the third Batman game where it's got the car in, that car in the Batman game is like a bigger version of the tank from Red Dog. So I texted him, I'm just really happy that you finally got to make Red Dog 2, mate. I'm so pleased for you.
Wow.
I have to admit I've never got past the boss on the second level of Red Dog because it was just far too difficult. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do the strafing controls. It was just
Stefan told me a lovely story about how they spent ages on the physics for Red Dog trying to get it really realistic and get the tank so it would feel right, and they just was too bouncy all the time. And so I think in the end they fixed it by setting its center of gravity 40 meters underground. And that was enough to like pin the physics down so it wouldn't keep pinging off into space when you hit a rock.
Wow.
It's brilliant. I love little stories like that.
That is amazing. Did you? I mean, your appraisal of Red Dog couldn't have been that great because it didn't come out on PS2, right? Like they didn't make a PS2 version.
I think just something else came along that suddenly made Argonaut very busy.
Right.
I think they did something like some big project came in. I can't remember what it was, but suddenly took priority.
Yeah.
My main thing I said about it was that I really thought that the game lacked character, and it would really benefit from something like what Nintendo did with Star Fox, where they just created characters that could give voice to the tank, I guess. Like you could see the commander and start to and relate to him a bit, or her. And I also thought they should introduce a drop ship, so the tank was kind of dropped and had extra things dropped down to it while you were playing. So you and that would give another character. Then you could have some interplay between the dropship pilot and the tank driver. Maybe you have sections where you're flying the dropship and you drop the tank into the action, things like that, just to kind of give it a bit more personality. Because I thought that actually the game was really fun. It was a bit hard, I agree with you, but it really lacked. It just was a bit soulless, I thought.
That's really interesting. I think maybe the game potentially that Argonaut went to work on was Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or maybe one of the other Harry Potter games could have been, because that would have been quite big, I would imagine, at the time. So. Yeah,
they did. Well, yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how public that is, but I suppose it doesn't matter anymore. But yeah, Argonaut made the first ever Harry Potter game, and I think in the credits there was some sort of deal where I don't know why EA didn't want to credit them properly, but basically in the credits for the game it just says certain technologies Argonaut Games PLC.
That's a bit of a slap.
They built the whole game using the engine from their game Croc that they made for the PS1.
Wow.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But they had a team of about 50 people working on it, probably, I would imagine. It's quite a big group.
Very interesting stuff there. Stuff interesting to know about, and Red Dog especially. So that's going to keep some of our listeners interested and getting some Dreamcast stuff. So in terms of Dreamcast, then, like, you still own one, I believe. I think last time we spoke, you still had one somewhere. I think
I've still got an English and a Japanese one.
Nice.
But the drive is going in the English one, so I was trying to get it. I was doing the old PlayStation trick of turning it upside down. It seemed to help a little bit, but I don't know. I should probably try and. Can you get it fixed? Is that a thing?
Caspar? I'm sure somebody of your stature in the Dreamcast community. We can have a look around and get you a Dreamcast.
Okay, I'm happy to pay for it. I just can't.
No, Caspar, it's a GoFundMe. We're just going to do a GoFundMe page for you.
I should get the hard drive thing we were talking about earlier. I'll get the flash memory thing. That sounds good.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, have you played a Dreamcast game recently? Is there anything that you still play fairly regularly, or?
The game that I put it on the cover of I think issue 2 of DC UK, right? The Power Stone.
Mm-hmm.
Power Stone. We talked about it actually in the ice cream parlour.
Yes, yeah.
And Power Stone was like, I just thought it was fantastic. I always preferred the first one to the second one. I thought the second one got a bit rambly and the RPG stuff seemed a bit tacked on. But the first one was really tight and really interesting and really different. And I to this day I don't understand why Capcom let that franchise wither, because it was there's great characters and it's got a really cool vibe to it, and the combat was really different and really easy to pick up and play. So actually, so when I did manage to get that to boot up on my UK Dreamcast, and I was playing that with my son last year, showing it to him. Capcom, if you're listening, bring back Power Stone, please.
Well, there's rumours they're going to. There was a whole leak thing from Capcom, and Power Stone was on it. So whether that's a remake or a brand new third game, don't know. But looks like they're going to revive it, which would be pretty cool.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah, taking them long enough. It's longer than Shenmue at this point. Come on, Capcom. My goodness. So, I mean, thinking about Dreamcast still, is there any Dreamcast games that maybe were, obviously apart from Power Stone, that were maybe hidden gems that you kind of played as part of, your writing for various magazines that maybe you don't think gets enough love these days?
I think you noticed last time we met that I played, I reviewed Ready to Rumble. I think that was the only game that I reviewed for DC UK.
Yeah. Yeah,
I really loved that game. It was just really ridiculous. It was really good fun. I'm trying to think. Someone gave me a copy once of Zero Gunner 2. I remember playing that and really enjoying that. But I've always been a sucker for those sort of scrolling shooters. What else? You might have to fill some airtime while I sit here gazing out the window trying to remember.
Tom, sing. Give us a song.
Oh, you don't want me to sing, guys.
And Grandia 2 that I reviewed for the official Dreamcast magazine, I thought was absolutely incredible. I actually crumbled. I don't know if I should admit this. I sold my white label copy of it last year. So, someone offered me 150 quid for it. I was like, oh, that's really good. Actually, I should just do that, because it's been sat in the loft for 20 years. And if they're going to play it and enjoy it, all more the power to them. So.
Was it you, Mike? Was it?
It wasn't me, no.
Mike has a lot of Dreamcast games. I mean, that's putting it mildly, to be fair. But
I've got a few.
Just a few. Do you know what? I don't think I've ever heard you speak less on a podcast, Mike. You're right there. Just want to check in.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Good. That's good. You've not kind of like had a.
I'm not dead. I'm not
good.
dead, Andrew.
Good to know. But yeah, I mean, if you come across any more Dreamcast games, Caspar, that you want to get rid of, then just ask Mike. He will more than likely take it off your hands.
I'm happy so.
I've got a review disc of Half-Life somewhere. That's,
Oh, now we're talking.
Yeah, cool. I mean, you must have. I mean, I think I asked you again when we did our interview what you had, and sounds like you've got a lot up in the attic that you need to go through and figure out. How Half-Life, amazing. Fingers crossed you've got something to do with Mr. Dreamcast up there. Be great.
I got everyone who attended the original event, the announcement event in Tokyo. For some reason, they gave them a Dreamcast branded laser pointer.
Ooh.
And I have that somewhere in the loft, which is good.
Your loft sounds like, that scene at the end of, what's it called? I forgot the name of the film now. With Nicolas Cage in it, and he's a sort of treasure hunter.
National Treasure?
National Treasure, yeah, where they open up the vault at the end and it's just like full of gold. It's like that.
Sounds like Indiana Jones, to be honest with you.
Oh, yeah.
So I did actually have an experience a bit like that, because when we were, obviously in the days of Dreamcast, I can't remember why this happened, but I think there was like an affiliation between Neo Geo and Dreamcast, right?
Yeah, there was, yeah.
Yeah, we covered Neo Geo stuff in the magazines, and I got sent loads of games at the time, and they were worth nothing for about 15 years, and I kept the box going, well, these are really unusual. I can't believe these aren't collectible. It's so ridiculous. And I kept checking on eBay. They'd be like 3 quid and 4 quid. I was like, oh, well, I'll keep it. You never know. Anyway, last year, for whatever reason, the price of Neo Geo Pocket Color stuff went absolutely ballistic. So I also should confess that I cashed in on some of that stuff as well. So I got that was like a national treasure moment. Like I lifted the lid and then I was like started typing them in eBay. I was like, oh my god! I think I got 400 quid for one of them.
Wow.
Wow. Do you know which one that was? It's be interesting to know that.
Dive Alert?
Dive Alert was one of them. What was one that really spot? I'm sorry, I'm just going to click on my computer. There might be some clicks because I've got a folder with pictures of it in. Documents, eBay.
Come on, Tom, where's that song?
Oh, what is
It's
it?
interesting because, I mean, the price of even Dreamcast games has gone up exponentially over the last even like year, 2 years. I remember a couple of years ago when I had a massive clear out and sold about 80% of my Dreamcast collection. The stuff that I was selling wouldn't have fetched even half of what it goes for on eBay now. It's gone crazy. So yeah,
even then, Tom, you thought it was too much when you sold it a couple of years ago. I remember at the time you were surprised by how much some of the things were going for them.
Yeah.
What did I find? Oh, I found it now. Yeah, I found. Yeah, you're making me nervous about having sold it now. I'm sort of thinking, well, should I just sat on it?
It's worth a house now.
Yeah, basically, I could have bought a Ferrari. The Gals SNK Gals Fighters, that was worth quite a lot, I think.
Yeah.
Puzzle Link 2. What else? What was the big one that would surprise me? Magical Drop Pocket. I think that was it. Someone gave me like £400 for that. I felt really bad, but I was like, well, if you want it, mate, I'm fine. Happy days. I got them for free.
Don't tell anyone.
Love we're getting all these secrets out of you today.
No, it's terrible. It's not going to be public. I'm going to go get a lynch mob banging on the door. People demanding a refund.
Oh dear. Did we have any other questions for Caspar at all?
Yeah, I've got a couple of general sort of questions about Dreamcast. What you said earlier on about the fact that when you first went to Japan and saw Dreamcast, it was exciting. Do you have any particular game or the first game you saw on the console running that made you realise this was, such a big step up?
I think it wasn't necessarily a specific game. I think just the step up in visual quality, especially if you're using like the VGA box and things to connect with, and you're getting that really crisp 640 480 output. It really was quite a big leap, and it was the first we'd seen of that new generation coming. That was also PS2 and the first Xbox, and I think it was that. It's sort of like it really felt like a big step on, and still then people were. It was the tail end of that time where people wanted arcade quality in the home, and obviously with the connection to the Naomi board, which was the Dreamcast arcade board, like you genuinely had it. You actually had this arcade box in your house, and it was like, I suppose, the final fulfillment of that promise that people have been making since the early 80s, that you can have arcade games in your house. It's like, wow, this is amazing. Like this is amazing 3D, lovely textures because it has such good texture memory, and it just looks so crisp. And the other thing I'd say about it actually is that the VGA box and the 640 480 output actually changed the way we could design games magazines, because screenshots up to then from consoles were tiny, right? So you're getting, especially if we had a capture system for the PS1 that used the S-video output, and they came out interlaced, right? So you had this interlaced 320 by 240 image, and actually what you've got is 320 by 120, and then you stretch it back out for some games. So that was the only way you could get an image, and suddenly Dreamcast had these screenshots you could run literally half a page of A4 and they looked okay. So it totally changed the way we could do layout of magazines and have these lovely big images, and you'll see that in DC UK.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And
we actually worked with the IT guys, really good IT department at Future, and they sourced what was actually a medical image capture card made by Matrox. And it was the only one they could find that could capture 640 480 at 60 frames a second. And we used that, and they had a custom bit of software written so we could hook the VGA box into this Matrox capture card in a PC, and we could get really nice 640 480 screenshots. And it just was like, it was fantastic, because I've always loved layout and loved like what you can do with magazine layout. And it was so exciting because you could show these games off like never before, basically. I think apart from that, that event in Tokyo, it just had a really good vibe to it. It just was really exciting, and it really felt like they knew they wanted to come back as something fresh and different. and it was so different to Saturn. Like, it was such a neat box, right? Dreamcast is a lovely physical object. It's got it's a nice size. It's really chunky and nice weight to it. And I think just everything felt good about it. It just really came back just really fired up and excited for them.
Yeah, I think everybody here on this podcast would agree with that, and that's the reason why we're still here today doing this, because it just felt like a revelation compared to everything else that had come out at the time. I mean, I went from an N64 to a Dreamcast, and the difference in visuals was just mind-blowing. You know, from playing things like Perfect Dark, which is a great game, but at such low resolution and with really sort of bad frame rate, to suddenly playing something like Sonic Adventure or Sega Rally 2, it was just like my irises shattered.
I think it was probably the last game as well. The last system I remember where Soul Calibur looked better than what you were getting on some PCs at that time. I was a PC gamer at the time, and I just remember on the PC Gamer forums, connecting it back to Future slightly, I remember that a lot of the PC guys were dreaming about the Dreamcast. Awful pun there, I do apologise. Because of the fact it looked such an advancement over the PS1 and N64.
Yeah, it was. I remember that reminds me, the Japanese correspondent guys told me there was something Namco had done. They had some sort of amazing memory compression routine, which was why Soul Calibur, why it looked so good. It was something to do with it just meant that they could get more textures than anyone else into the memory of the Dreamcast, which already had quite a lot of texture memory at the time. And that was part of how it looked so beautiful. And I think as well they had really good tools for colouring characters and things, and for applying textures, which nowadays, like, people have Unity and Unreal and everything, they take all that for granted. But back then people wrote their own tools. Yeah. And so the ability to freeze, I think they had the ability to freeze the game, and they could look at where textures were stretching and correct errors in them, and that's why all of it looks so fantastic, you know.
Still does now. Still a really nice looking game even today.
Yeah.
For all those reasons. Mike, was there anything else you wanted to ask?
Yeah, just a random one again, really. The sort of magazines back in the day were known for letters and people writing into you. I remember I sent a few letters myself back into the game magazines back in the 90s. Was it as weird as some of the letters that were published in magazines actually? Because you read through some of the letters now, some of the comments that people send in are just bizarre. Was it that weird? Was the correspondence that weird?
Oh, bless. We had a guy that used to ring up. So people would call the office, right? Because they'd call Future Publishing and go, "I can speak to Edge Magazine," and get put through. And so readers could call up. And one guy used to call, and he just wanted to know exactly what Edge thought about absolutely everything. And he'd ring up probably like 2 or 3 times a week, and we'd have to, obviously you're trying to make a magazine, right? So you want to talk to people, but you just didn't have that much time. Yeah, if you got him on the phone, you'd just be like, one more question, just one more question. And you'd be on the phone to him for with the phone tucked under your shoulder, trying to work and type, and talking to this guy for like an hour and a half. The letters were quite, Edge was quite, people would kind of I suppose the readership, they were trying to, they'd either kind of write in with quite interesting points, so they'd write in trying to argue with you about something you'd said or done. So we usually had quite good letters back to pick from. I had an interaction on Twitter about 2 or 3 years ago with a guy, I think his name's Sam Barker, and Sam had actually written to Mr. Dreamcast when he was a kid.
I'm looking at his letter right now as you say this. Yeah, points and prizes.
He basically runs one of the PlayStation websites, and I can't remember which one it is. I'm googling it as we.
Are you going to read the letter for us, Tom?
I can call it from Sam Barker.
Push Square it is.
Yes, I know the website. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's the editor.
Wow.
A Push Square, that's right. And that's Sam Barker who wrote to Mr. Dreamcast. And I think it might have been because of Playlink. He might have even been interviewing me, and he sort of went, I just sort of wanted to say that I wrote to you when I was a kid, and you put my letter in the magazine, and it was amazing. I was like, oh God, how bonkers is that? And also you make me feel like a really old bastard.
Well, this is your life now, because I'm gonna read this letter to you. So the title of the letter is Points, Win Prizes, and it begins, "Dear Mr. Dreamcast, I read your first issue of the mag and thought it was brill. I especially enjoyed the free poster and your tips on Crazy Taxi. I only have one thing that I would like to see in the future, and that is an option where readers could send in their top scores and win prizes. That's from Sam Barker. And the reply is, that's something I've been talking to my team about, and they'll be whistling up something just like you're after soon. So keep your eyes peeled, Sam. You didn't actually keep that promise because you killed the magazine.
Look at that! Look at that! Look, he's suggesting editorial features even then, and he went on to have a website. So obviously had an aptitude for it.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's cool. I think we just need like a podcast where we read out letters from all Dreamcast magazines in the future.
That's good.
Track down the people who wrote the letters. All right. I mean, I'm happy to start wrapping things up unless anybody's got anything else that's pressing that they really want to ask, or
no,
speak now, forever hold your peace.
My thirst for knowledge on Mr. Dreamcast has been well and truly quenched. So thank you, Caspar. It's been amazing.
Oh no, thank you.
Awesome.
No, I really enjoyed it.
It's been good. You'll have Tom like messaging you now, constantly asking you when you've got into the attic. So be prepared.
Caspar, on page 15 of episode, I keep saying episode of issue 2 of Mr. Dreamcast, you said this, but actually what you meant is no.
You're going to be a new one more question guy. I've got just one more question.
Cool. Well, that was really fun. Thank you so much for coming on, Caspar, and chatting us through things. And hopefully you don't get into trouble with anybody for some of the stuff that you've unveiled to us today. Fingers crossed.
No, it's brilliant. I always love remembering those times. I had a lot of fun. Being a games journalist in the late 90s was a crazy, special time. You know, all the journalists tell me it's nothing like that now. There's so many amazing press trips and crazy things that we did. So, I was lucky, really lucky to do it when I did.
One last question, Caspar. What was your favourite press trip?
Wow. That Acclaim one that I mentioned earlier was good because I got to spend a week hanging out with Dave Deanspear, who was the producer of Turok. And I spent a week with him when they were finishing Turok 2, and we did the exclusive review of it for Edge. And that was really cool. Definitely going to Tokyo was incredible. I went to Tokyo 3 times, and all of them were brilliant. I mean, it was just, it's Blade Runner is a cheesy thing to reference when you talk about Japan, but it was kind of a fresher reference 20 years ago than it is now. And I think just walking through the streets of Tokyo at night in the rain and there's neon everywhere, and I was like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Look at this. And so that was cool. I'm trying to think what else. We did some good things. Got taken driving sports cars a few times. That was good fun.
Nice.
And I got to know Peter Molyneux, the game designer, reasonably well. Did an interview, did a whole feature about Black and White, and ended up going back and crashing at his house. And he had the most crazy house. I don't know if he lives there anymore, but he had a secret door in the snooker. He had a snooker room, and you pulled one of the snooker cues, and in the rack, and this door opened to the garden.
Wow.
And he also had a big marble frieze at one end of the living room, and you clicked a remote control. I don't know if I should say it. I saw it. I don't know. I've not seen it for ages. He probably doesn't live there anymore. That you click this button, and this marble frieze like split apart like a Bond villain's lair, and behind it was his swimming pool.
What?
How the? Am I going to say TV?
Yeah, that's mad. I mean, for you living in like a little flat, like going to somebody's house like that, it must be mental.
This is what games people have. I want to work in the games industry. I want to go make video games. So I want one of those. Yeah.
Where's your secret door, Caspar?
Got one. Yeah, I need to get one.
You've not made it. You've not made it yet.
No.
So you got Peter Molyneux where the Dreamcast version of Black and White is. I'm still waiting for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he had a games room with floor-to-ceiling board games and everything. Amazing stuff. Yeah, he was. Wow. It's cool because you want to know that games people were living that sort of crazy life, right? You know, you want to sort of know that someone like rock stars have the crazy rock star houses. So you want rock star game developers to have rock star game developer houses. I think that's he ticked all the boxes, and I tip my hat to him for that.
There we go. That was the last question. I won't ask you anymore, I promise. So thank you again very much. If people want to find you, chat to you, whatever, where can they find you online if they so wish to?
I'm cunningly hidden on Twitter under my handle Caspar Field. So yeah, I'm there if people want to chat to me or ask me questions, or I'm always happy to talk about Dreamcast stuff if people want to look me up.
Awesome. So. Tom, you need to get Daddy Dreamcast following Caspar Field now. Tom does actually have a Twitter handle at Daddy Dreamcast. Did you lose the login for that? Can you no longer log into that? I can't remember.
I set it up and then forgot the password. So yeah, we won't talk about that.
No. If you have the Mr. Dreamcast Twitter handle, that's the important thing.
That's a good question.
Oh, that is a good question. Someone must have that.
If they don't, get it set up, Caspar.
I'm looking right now. It's probably like you're going to beat me to it though.
And Tom's frantically typing away. I know we'll get it.
It's mine. And please have the little Mr. Dreamcast logo as well.
Oh, to my shame, I can't remember the name of the guy who did that for us. He was an artist who worked at Argonaut.
Oh, really?
Jez San hooked me up with him, and he did I had this idea for the character, and he did it as a 3D model and exported it so we could pose it, so we could kind of move him around and do all the different poses for the magazine.
Mm.
So,
that's cool.
Nice.
Someone has got Mr. Dreamcast.
Damn.
Oh, but they've had it since 2014 and they haven't tweeted.
Oh.
I think that counts as camping. You can apply to Twitter and get them to.
You can.
If anyone can do it, it's you, Caspar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get on it. Definitely do it.
That's your IP.
Yeah. Kick him off. Get him off there. Lovely, thank you for that. Tom, where can people find you other than at Daddy Dreamcast? Although please do send your questions to Daddy Dreamcast, even though he can't answer them at the moment.
You can find me mainly just kind of skulking around the Dreamcast Junkyard Twitter account, and also Power Drifting Pod, which is a podcast that me and Mike do, which is all about rally games. So if you like rally games, give us a listen.
Yeah. Can find you on the Discord as well now, can't we? If you go to Dreamcast Junkyard, the dreamcastjunkyard.co.uk, you can find a link to our new Discord channel, and you're around there sometimes.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. Mike, what about yourself?
Yep, so also at Discord, but also at Twitter at @space_turnip, and also under at Dreamcast Pics, which is where I put lots of pictures about my Dreamcast collection because I'm very bored.
Yep, and soon to be your Mechleth as well, I'm sure.
And my Mechleth, yeah.
Yep. You can find me at Oddment84. I always do it, but I'll plug it anyway. You can also find me at Dreamcast Years, which is my podcast, and anything to do with the books. And of course, you can find all of us at the DC Junkyard on Twitter. Find us on the dreamcastjunkyard.co.uk, and you've got links to everywhere that we are over on the website as well. So please do take a look, read some of the wonderful articles, and listen to some more DreamPod episodes. But thank you again, Caspar, for coming on and chatting to us. And
thank you. It's been brilliant. I really enjoyed it.
Very good. And we will see everybody on the next episode. Take care. See you later. Bye.
Please stop this disc now.